There are a few schools who've given Nebraska problems these past 5 years, but none of them are more annoying than Minnesota. They're not like Wisconsin or Iowa, who field the best defense in the country or have a history of winning the division. They're just well coached, they're tough and physical, and they never quit. The fact is, PJ Fleck built a winning football program that fans in Lincoln wish they had. It's hard enough to win on the road at night against anybody in the Big Ten, but add in that we're working with a brand new coaching staff, a new QB, and playing a team who's won this game 4 years in a row, and it's easy to see why most people think a loss is inevitable. The good news is I'm not most people, and I can think of plenty of reasons to believe Matt Rule can start off hot in his Big Ten debut. So today, I'm giving you my preview and prediction for the season opener in Minneapolis, and we'll talk about why I think Nebraska can pull off the upset. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my live post-game reaction on Thursday night. And if you think Nebraska can beat Minnesota this week, smash the like button for good luck and help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
Thompson lines up, goes deep, got a man, touchdown!
After Rule put out the depth chart for this week, the first thing I did was count how many new starters there were on each side. And on offense, every skill position features a new name. And of course, two of the O-linemen weren't here last season. On defense, there are a few transfers, but there's a ton of returning experience in the starting lineup with 6 starters back. I think the biggest surprise for me was seeing Anthony Grant as the number 3 behind Ramir Johnson. Not that Ramir isn't a solid back, but Grant went for almost 1,000 and Ramir barely played. So what it tells me is the running back room is going to be one of the most complete in the Big Ten, since we know the top 3 are all talented enough to start. And this wasn't a surprise, but just something to note. There are 5 true freshmen listed in the 2 deep, and I'd bet another 2 who could see time this week. But the best thing about there being so many new names here is that it makes it so much harder for a new coach to scout and make a game plan. Fleck mentioned in his presser that they'll look back at Syracuse to get an idea of how the D could look and try to figure out how much Satterfield brings over from South Carolina, but it's really hard to know what you're going to see with a new staff who hasn't worked together before. PJ obviously has the upper hand with years of building his program and developing players who fit what they do, but the element of surprise can't be taken for granted, and that's probably the biggest advantage Rule has with all these new players taking on important roles. This week, I've got 3 live streams scheduled back to back to back, and it starts on Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Central. College Football with Sam comes on to talk about his Big Ten predictions and what he thinks about this week's game. Then on Wednesday, I'll be live during the volleyball game to give my final predictions for the Big Ten. I'll react to hot takes from the comment section, and I think John from Coronation will be joining me. Then on Thursday, right after the game, I'll be back to give you my instant reaction to the good, the bad, the win, the loss, or whatever else happens. And I like to do live call-ins on the stream, so if you want to be a part of that, make sure you're a part of our Corn Crazed Discord group that you can join for free if you just click the link in the description box below. Now let's talk about PJ Fleck, because I know there are a bunch of fans who think he's corny or fake and don't like all of his antics around building the brand, but I think he deserves more credit than he gets. He and Frost didn't like each other at all, and I think for PJ it was justified. He looked at Frost as the spoiled kid who got handed the keys to a Ferrari, but because he didn't know how to drive it, Fleck smoked him 3 times in the stock Mustang. We've heard Rule talk about their relationship, and I think they get along because they're both detail and process-oriented coaches. During the presser the other day, PJ talked about the identity of Minnesota's program, and even though there are a bunch of new players and some new coaches on the staff, the identity won't change. They're going to be the same team who knows how to win Big Ten games the way they have been for 4 years now. They're not flashy. They don't have any 5-star recruits or a crazy tough stadium to play in. They're just Minnesota. They're a hockey school with 6-win expectations, and Fleck's been overachieving for years now. This game might not be a top 25 matchup, but we'll get to see 2 top-tier coaches face off in one of the best coaching matchups that Nebraska will get this whole season. The last time Nebraska won in Minneapolis was all the way back in 2015 under Mike Riley, and in the 3 games since, only one was competitive. The situation now is probably the worst you can ask for too, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have hope. Since this one's on a Thursday and there's only one other game on at the same time, we're talking about a primetime slot. The stadium's sold out, the fans are going to be decked out in gold, and Minnesota's the favorite. The pressure to win is on Fleck, not Matt Rule. Let's talk about the offense and what co-coordinators Matt Simon and Greg Harbaugh are bringing to the table. It starts with Ethan Kaliak-Manis at QB, who started 5 games last year and completed 54% of his passes. But now that he's been practicing as the starter, that percentage is going to go up. He's a better runner than Tanner Morgan, and he's got a much stronger arm too. He shredded Wisconsin's D last year for over 300 yards with a few good receivers, but this year, that room's going to be even better. Chris Altman-Bell's back as a 6th-year senior. Daniel Jackson had over 500 yards last season, and both Corey Crooms and Elijah Spencer, who came in from the portal, were the number 1 guys at their last schools. Add in NFL caliber tight end Brevin Spanford, who caught 42 for 497 yards, and the Minnesota passing attack looks like it could be the best it's ever been under Fleck. Now, the ground game's a different story. The 2 starting running backs are Western Michigan transfer Sean Tyler and true freshman Darius Taylor, and it doesn't sound like either did enough to separate in camp, so it'll be by committee. The O-line lost 3 starters and 2 were good enough to make it to the pros, so there's going to be a drop-off in talent. The new center's a 6th-year senior who started in 3 games, but the left guard and the right tackle have only played backup roles in a few games. The hardest part for the O-line is preparing for what Nebraska can bring with different packages on D, but PJ hired Nick Monroe as co-DC from Syracuse after he spent the last 2 years working for Tony White, and he should be able to provide some insight and give the offensive staff an idea of what they should watch for. On defense, 2 of their DBs, a D-end, and a linebacker all left for the NFL, but 6 starters are back on a unit that ranked in the top 10 nationally after they held teams to 13 points a game last year. Their defensive stats all looked really good, but the reality is the schedule wasn't great. The crossovers were Michigan State, Penn State, and Rutgers, and the non-conference was even worse. The D-line returns 2 starters but lost depth. The linebackers returned 1 starter and added 1 from Western Michigan. And the DBs returned 2 and add a starting corner from Georgia Southern. I'm sure they'll reload at some spots and be competitive, but it's probably not the strength in this first game, and the matchup's perfect for a brand new run-heavy offense trying to establish an identity. I want to talk about the betting line for this game to see what Vegas thinks, but before we do, I want to make sure that if you do want to bet on this game or any other teams this weekend, that you have the opportunity to. Our sponsor for today's video is BroThrow, which is the best platform I've used to place bets on games because it's available in all 50 states. It doesn't require a deposit. There are no minimums or withdrawal requirements. And most importantly, you don't pay a 10% VIG since it's not a sports book. We've had over 850 Corn Craze subscribers join us over there, so if you're betting on spreads, totals, and money lines anywhere else, you can join us for free at brothrow.com/GBR to start placing bets for even money payouts, and you'll ultimately make more with BroThrow. And if you want more content from me, I took over their YouTube channel and I make weekly predictions videos for games around the country. So if you want to check that content out, you can click the link in the description box below or just search BroThrow on YouTube and you'll find the channel there. The line for this game opened at 8, moved down to 6.5, and now it sits at 7. The last 3 times they played, it ended in a 7-point win for Minnesota, so the line makes perfect sense. But is that too many for the first game of the season? In the first 2 weeks last year, 3 Big Ten games were played between Nebraska Northwestern, Penn State Purdue, and Indiana Illinois, and all of those finished with a 3 or 4 point margin. If those games were played at any other point in the season, I'd argue that Indiana, Penn State, and Nebraska all would have won those by 7-10, but week 1 matchups are more likely to be dogfights. The question is, do you think Nebraska plays tough to the end and keeps it within 1 score, or can Minnesota separate themselves and win convincingly? The total's set at 43.5, which seems really low, but Nebraska's plans to run it. The new rule change means the clock won't stop as often, and in the past 4 meetings, the total only went over 41 one time. I won't bet the total since there's so much unknown with both offenses, but I'm definitely not expecting a shootout. Here's the deal. It's tough to give a prediction when we're talking about two teams who we haven't gotten to see play yet. There's a lot of promise for Nebraska's defense, and the Minnesota offense has a crazy high ceiling if Kaliak-Manis can match what he did against Wisconsin last year. Minnesota thrives off mistakes and undisciplined teams, hence the win streak over Scott Frost. But last season, when they played teams with competent coaches, they couldn't beat them. The 4 losses were to Illinois, Iowa, Purdue, and Penn State. They beat Mel Tucker's Michigan State and Greg Schiano's Rutgers, but the other 6 wins were over broken programs. I'm not trying to say PJ doesn't have a solid team, but Nebraska matches up well with them and can win this game if they can limit turnovers, tackle better than they have in the past, and they can just finish drives. The biggest difference between these teams in the past has been toughness, both mental and physical. We've watched Minnesota run it down their throats over and over until the defense was mentally broken. And on that mental side, when it gets to the fourth quarter, Minnesota still believes they're going to win and find a way to hang on even when they're tied or trailing. Nebraska's players were hardly ever able to. That mental component and the confidence was lacking so much that even if they had a 10-point lead, a loss still felt inevitable. Now, Nebraska's run game is going to be the best it's been in years. Sims, at the very least, should be able to put up Adrian Martinez numbers. And the defense that features multiple starters from their top 40 2021 unit has plenty of playmakers on all 3 levels. They've spent months building trust with their coaches and confidence in themselves, and the pressure that they've felt in the past 2 seasons isn't as intense. I think whoever wins only does it by 3, but I'm taking Nebraska to cover the 7 on the road and to win this one outright 27-24 to give Matt Rule his first win as a Big Ten head coach. I know it's a bold call to predict a season-opening win for a brand new coach, but playing the underdog role is only going to help this team focus in, and with an entirely new game plan to keep Fleck's staff guessing, I love the position they're in. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. Is the sold-out, gold-out night game environment too much to handle, or will the players get more pumped to play in the primetime spotlight? Does Matt Rule have the coaching edge over PJ Fleck, or is it going to take him a few games to recognize what he's got on both sides of the ball? Is Jeff Sims prepared to lead a game-winning drive, or is the defense going to have to come up with a big-time play in the clutch to pull this one out? I think Sims has so much potential to be great. I just want to see him in action before I get overly excited with the upside. But that's all I've got for today. So until next time, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red.